So our keynote speaker for today's session, the Vice President of the International Council of Museums, Mr. Terry Nyambe. And also, our keynote speaker for tomorrow's session, Senior Specialist from the Anthropological Department of the American Museum of Natural History, Ms. Amy Zhong, 张雨英小姐. And today, we also have a commentary speaker from National Taiwan Museum, the Assistant Researcher, Dr. Zhang Anqi. Okay. Allow me to look at my cheat sheet. And also with us, all the way from Taidong, one of our panelist speaker, the director of the National Museum of Prehistory, Dr. Fudu Cai. Again, all the way from the mountain areas of Taichung, another panelist speaker, the principal of Pu'uma Elementary School in Taichung, Mr. Pilin Yabu. And in our symposium for the 3 sessions, we're very privileged to have other guests from all over the world joined us. So the invited guests, the chair of ICOM Working Group on Decolonization, Ms. Hannah Pennock. And also the judge of ICOM Sustainability Award, Ms. Catherine Cole. And the chair of ICOM Ecomon, Dr. Asma Ibrahim. And a board member of ICOM Germany, Ms. Suilan Hauptmann. An independent photographer from Hamburg, Germany, Andrea Pressing. And I would like just to briefly mention that this symposium is very special. We have 3 sessions. The first 2 sessions will be here at National Taiwan Museum in Taipei. We actually will have the 3rd session in Pingdong in the south city of Taiwan. And it is our honor that both panelist speakers of the Pingdong session also joined us. And so let's welcome one of the panel speaker, a independent Rukai curator, Pero-san. For the Pingdong session. And also another panel speaker from Bonan Cultural Museum in Haiduan Township, Ms. Languz Lavalian. And given our very packed agenda, I must apologize for not individually recognizing or acknowledging every distinguished guest who has made their journey to join us. But please know that your presence enriches our discussions immensely. And now I would like to invite the director of National Taiwan Museum to deliver our welcoming remarks and officially launch this important dialogue. So, Director Chen, please.
Distinguished guests, welcome to the National Taiwan Museum. A warm welcome to this international symposium. We have been working tirelessly to organize this international symposium. Thanks to the dedication and hard work of our team, including Phaedra and our dedicated colleagues, here we are today. The National Taiwan Museum is one of the oldest museums here in Taiwan. We feel the weight of such responsibility on our shoulder. And we need to honestly address the natural history researches and the museum's practices that have continued to this day. In the olden days, the voices and the perspectives of the indigenous people and the local communities were often overlooked. And now we are taking on a renewed direction to optimize our diversified services to serve a much wider audiences of the contemporary time. In fact, this international symposium, and as Phaedra has already pointed out, is divided into 3 different sessions, 2 in Taipei, 1 in Pingtung, and there are many other affiliated sessions and workshops. Most of our invited guests from overseas will also be visiting the southern part of Taiwan as well as the National Museum of Prehistory in the eastern part of Taiwan. We will be addressing a few important topics today. How a museum can represent the dynamics of traditional ecological knowledge in a decolonialized framework or context. And our speakers will give us more valuable details and insights during their presentations today. Indigenous traditional knowledge is no longer at the peripheral in the knowledge construct or systems. In fact, their contributions to land management, resource use, to cultural and ecological sustainability serve as a great source of learning and inspiration. So after the keynote speeches today, we will be inviting our researchers to comment. And for the meeting tomorrow, we will be discussing balancing conservation and utilization in puppetry collections. Today, we face issues not just including the preservation and use of artifacts, there is also an imperative to consider and embed these artifacts in its original cultural and social context, injecting new life into these artifacts. If you would please direct your attention to the poster for this year's symposium. It seems familiar, yet it seems quite different. It draws its inspiration from the architectural styles of the National Taiwan Museum. However, its walls and its columns, or the walls of columns of the original architectural design, have been removed or placed at different locations. This means that we're tearing down walls. We are creating an environment where things can be taken down, ideas can be deconstructed, and that you could see rainbow and stars over the bright blue sky. And that highlights our vision to transform ourselves into a platform for different voices and perspectives, for a diverse spectrum of values and power relationships. Today offers a great opportunity for us to discuss how museums could become more socially engaged and inclusive. Let's bounce ideas off one another to create more possibilities. This is not just an opportunity for ideas exchange, but also for self-reflection. This symposium has brought together experts, practitioners, and cultural professionals from across Taiwan and around the world. So once again, a warm welcome to you all.
Speaker, Mr. Terry Nyambe. He has been an executive board member of ICOM, International Council of Museums, since July 2016. He has been a member of several committees in ICOM before joining the executive board. He has been a member of the Ethics Committee from 2011 and 2016, and he has been a member of ICOM Strategic Planning Committee from 2014 to 2019. He was also a board member of the International Committee on Documentation from 2013 to 2016, and currently he serves as the vice president of ICOM. In Zambia, where he is from, he works for National Museum Board as a museum development manager for all national museums in the country. He has studied ecology, museology, and also business administration. He is an ardent proponent of decolonization of museums in the world, and he is ICOM's board's representative in the working group on decolonization. And now please give him a warm round of applause on stage here.
你好. Thank you very much, and Pedra, for that introduction. And I must also just state right from the beginning to say my gratitudes to the National Taiwan Museum for organizing this very, very important symposium in these 3 days. We will have a nice time to see your beautiful country. We have seen it. It's my first time in Taiwan, I must admit. And there is one interesting thing that I've been looking forward to before coming. I have seen, and I'm going to put one of my friends on the spot, Phaedra, who has always been posting the nice Taiwan food. And I have opportunity to test this food. And I must also say, I'm very excited to meet so many of you already under 24 hours of being here. Very nice, warm, and friendly people of Taiwan. And this is a very good virtue that I must say you must keep up. And today, of course, you have already heard ICOM and so many things they've done within ICOM, but I also wear a different hat. I'm also a natural historian. And at the beginning, I had a presentation and I've had to tweak it. And because today we're talking about traditional ecological knowledge, and I thought I should delve into that and talk about it from the African perspective, so that we can share and see what is being done in Taiwan, and then we can have some gray areas, but also see similarities of how people are different. We're different from different continents, different traditions, cultures, but we are one people at the end of the day. So being an ICOM, doesn't work? Yeah, that's the one. Again, yeah? Okay. So, first of all, I want to just start by sharing where I come from. I come from a country called Zambia. It is right in the southern part of Africa. And as you can see, it is a very landlocked country, no access to the sea. And you know what that means? We must be peaceful with all our neighbors, or otherwise we are doomed. And so we have just slightly over 20 million people in that particular country. It is a country that is endowed with and blessed with natural resources, as it is in Southern Africa, as you can see, but yet almost 40% of the fresh waters in Southern Africa are found in my country, Zambia. So we have a lot of natural resources in there. But we are here, and I'll be failing in my duties if I don't talk about ICOM. So ICOM is the International Council of Museums. It is an organization that constitutes museums and museum professionals from around the world. It was established in 1946, and it is based, its headquarters is in Paris, and we have now over 60,000 members across the world in many, many countries, over 140 countries. We have about 118 national committees in different countries. And we also have within ICOM what we call international committees. And these are committees for the different fields in museums you can think of, be it natural history, exhibitions, conservation, name them. And we have these international committees. Other than these, we also have standing committees like the Ethics Committee, and we also have many different working groups, such as the Decolonization Working Group that you've just heard, National Committee Working Groups, and so on, that give advice to the ICOM board on what they need to do. So in the structure of ICOM, the governance group is the executive board, which has a president, 2 vice presidents, of which I am one of them. And then we have 11 executive board members there within the organization. And so why should you join ICOM? And we are here, and there are members that are potential members to become ICOM members working for museums or studying museology or anything related to museums. You have, of course, an opportunity to attend many international conferences around the world. We have a triannual general conference coming up just in November in Dubai. I'll be happy to see all of you in Dubai at some point. It would be good. You have access to the many publications, the network of museum professionals that we have within ICOM, participate in exchange programs, trainings, many other things that ICOM does and cooperates with many institutions around the world. So it is a big network of museums and museum professionals, and it is really important. And if you want to learn more about this organization, just go online on icom.museum and you learn much more about our organization, ICOM. And now we come back to natural history. And when we talk about natural history in our institutions, in museums, we collect objects, specimens of different flora and fauna or plants and animals. And why do we collect? Why do we have them in our spaces? We keep them certainly for many other aspects, not just to show that we have these, but they are for research. Of course, we keep them for conservation. We do a lot of things with the collections that we have. Education, and we document them so that we can have a reference collection of what we have. And these collections that we keep serve as a voucher of what is existing. If we talk about, for instance, conservation of our environment, how can we talk about conservation without knowing what we have? And how do we know what we have? The space that we keep these collections as vouchers are museums, so we keep them for that. But even much more, the natural historians will use these collections for studies such as taxonomy to know what is already there. In the olden times, we did all these physical identifications of specimen, and today we've gone beyond that. These materials that we keep are now being used for genetic research, genetic identification. And many times for natural historians, what we're seeing as same species are not the same species after they've been subjected to genetic research and so on. So this has been mainly why we have been keeping these particular collections in the museums as museums experts or natural historians. And when you look at all that, it is pretty much from the Western side of knowledge of things. You don't see traditional ecological knowledge being collected and being put up there. And when the collections were done, it did not, most of them don't talk about this particular aspect. And so then the question comes, why should we care about this traditional ecological knowledge? And it is called many things, many different things everywhere. Yeah, some people just refer to it as indigenous knowledge systems and many different phrases, but it is all the same thing. This is about knowledge from our forefathers, from our ancestors, that has been transmitted through ages, transmitted to the younger generation in many different forms, through storytelling, fairy tales, poems, and so on and so forth. And we must admit first that this knowledge was not given priority in many museums, and in many museums still is not a priority, but conventional knowledge is what is kept. And as such, it also causes a threat to this traditional ecological knowledge as we go on talking about globalization in the world we live in. So it is much more important for us to start decolonizing how we do our museology today, to start thinking of being encompassing. The director here talked about how we can, as museums, offer space for more voices to be heard in these institutions. And I always say to colleagues that if museums cannot identify themselves with the communities that they serve, then they have failed. What is the need to have a museum when the local people that are within that particular space cannot identify themselves there? They don't see themselves represented. And sometimes it's because we, as curators, as museum managers, don't think about the communities that we are supposed to be serving. And we have to think beyond the spaces of just thinking collections and how we present them with the almighty knowledge of the mighty curator who decides what must be exhibited and what must be not, what must be learned and what must not be learned. So in doing all this, we must start decolonizing and thinking, how do we balance the knowledge that is there? Because certainly our forefathers had a lot of knowledge about where they lived, their environment. Much of the environment that we have today and the flora and fauna, the animals, plants that we see today is by large because our forefathers knew how to preserve them in some way. And so when we start talking about conventional way of protecting the environment, we must start rethinking, how did our forefathers do it? Is there anything that we can learn out of it? And museums must start grasping, must start recording, must start showcasing this particular knowledge so that we can learn from what our forefathers did. Now, talking about this traditional ecological knowledge, I wear my African hat and share this particular knowledge from the African perspective. And I just talked about different ways and means this knowledge has been transmitted through, say, totems, taboos, and customary laws that have been there. And also, as Africans, there were always spaces that were not allowed traditionally, so you cannot go in that particular area. There were rules and regulations, and there were also sanctions for people that did not do that. That's our nature as Africans and how we lived. And I believe even in Taiwan, there are all these things happening somewhere, and I want to learn a little more from you. We used metaphors, proverbs, that were said to children. I was saying to one of my colleagues here that back in Africa, traditionally, before all this digital world where everyone now is on Google, even when we're in a meeting like this, somebody is in a different world because they have their phone and they're talking to friends in China, Japan, and all those things. But before, we didn't have these things back home in the village. When it was evening, you sat around a bonfire, grandchildren with their grandfather, and the grandfather transmits the tradition to them through stories, proverbs, songs, and telling all fairy tales to the children, but giving them lessons of what it means. And in these particular stories, there were also stories about how people should behave in society, in communities, and how they should take care of their environment, animals and plants. And so you find that this knowledge actually has been developed over centuries by our ancestors and passed on to the young generation. And traditional leadership certainly put up these rules which were supposed to be followed. And of course, as I mentioned, there were sanctions if one breached the rules of engagement. And so it must be the same here. I want to hear also from you, and how are the people, the armies, the Atayao, how are they doing it in Taiwan? Is there anything like this that we can learn from? What about the Taiwan? What are they doing about it? So we want to see this, and we must be thinking about how was this being done. And in this particular case, I said I would just share with you some of the information of how in Africa, Zambia specifically, how the Zambians have been promoting this traditional ecological knowledge. And in one of the museums I've been and worked for over 20 years, in the natural history gallery, there is a section where we have exhibited the traditional ecological knowledge and how the people preserved the environment. The picture you see there is one of Zambia's World Heritage Site and one of the 7 wonders of the world, the Victoria Falls. And in that Victoria Falls, as spectacular as it may be, to the local people that live around this particular area, it is a sacred place. It is not a place to go and play. It is not a place to go and vandalize. It's not a place to go and cut trees and things like this. And it has almost 110 meters down that particular gorge, what we call a boiling pot or boiling point. It is an important area for tourists to go and have fun and see the water when it comes down and swelling around, and it is exciting for visitors. But for the locals, it is sacred. And they say there is a river goddess that lives there, and we give respect, and they don't go often down there. But because of the ecology of the area, it is almost evergreen, because every time the water is falling down, there is mist, and it's called, the locals call it mus otunya, which means the smoke that thunders, and there is always rain when there is enough water, and the vegetation is evergreen, and you have very unique plants that you don't find in the region down there. And by saying that people cannot go and vandalize, and it's a spiritual area, in that way, this vegetation has been kept over the years. And so you can see that traditional knowledge, norms, customs have helped to protect this particular area. And this we want to depict in the museum to show people what it means to other people, And also it, oh, sorry. And I want to talk about animals. When you come to Africa, you want to see beautiful elephants and the big five, as people say. But traditionally, people protected animals. Many stories were told. For instance, in the tribe where I come from, Lozi, no one is allowed to kill the elephant except the king of the tribe says so. And so there is a sanction if you kill the elephant. But also, other traditions believed that the elephant, as big as it may be, it is constituted of many unwanted animals, such as chameleons, snakes, and so on. And then it gave people the idea, this is not nice to kill an elephant and eat, because we might just be biting into what is unpleasant. But in that particular way, these animals were preserved because of instructions, cultures, beliefs. But even beyond that, there is an aspect of totems and taboos. Now, you find many tribes, at least in Southern Africa, I know, West Africa could have also, where people have names that are related to the animals. And one name, I'll give an example. It's difficult, you don't have to practice. It's called Njovu. Njovu means elephant. So you find people have names in Njovu and their totem is elephant name. And what that means is that if they are Njovus, or some could be called the Munyati, which is a buffalo, they will mean they belong to the buffalo clan. They will never kill an elephant, they will never kill the buffalo, because that's where they belong, and they'll be protective of them when they meet. And in this particular way, people learn to love what they connect with, and in that way, they preserve these particular animals. And this is certainly a traditional ecological knowledge that help to promote conservation of our heritage, and it must be documented. It must be in museums, and it is in museums. And we must talk about these things when we want to talk about how do we protect the environment. We talk about trees. There are many things that are said about trees. In promoting trees, there are proverbs that, for instance, that say, a tree that is alone does not create a forest, and it tries to encourage communities to ensure that they protect the trees, they plant trees. We have a forest because we benefit from forests, not just for wood, but for non-wood products, such as mushroom. You will not have mushroom, you will not have honey, you will not have materials for housing, thatching, and so on. And it is important for that. And this is inculcated in children. And for instance, in our forefathers never had this medicine that you go today, buy over the counter, whether it's aspirin, Panadol, and so on. Their medication came from the woods. And I'm sure even the indigenous people in Taiwan do the same. They know what medication to take when you have a flu, when you have a cough, when you have diarrhea or whatever. So it is all in the forest. And they did that. But to promote sustainability of these plants, I'll tell you one story. It is, for instance, taboo to get the bark of a tree from a tree you find injured already, where somebody has gotten a bark. You don't go there to get, it's said it's taboo. And what is the taboo? If you get from that plant that is already injured, it therefore means that if that tree dies, then your patient back home has a high possibility of dying. See? But there was another aspect. Even if you are getting from the same species of tree, it is also taboo to get the whole lot that you want from that particular tree, but you are advised to get from 3, 4 different ones of the same species. And the idea was said, if you get from 3, 4 trees, the barks, and put together, then you are combining, you are putting synergy and adding strengths of different trees and increasing the possibility of your patient to get healed and get healthy. But now, think of it scientifically. Scientifically, then it means if the tree is injured a little bit by getting the bark, there is a high chance of it recovering. And in that way, you're promoting sustainability within the communities, and then the communities can continue to survive for ages, and then they kept this culture going, and it means there is advantage of sustaining these natural resources for future generations. And this is information that we want to also say, other than the conventional knowledge that we talk about when we want to talk about conservation in our spaces as museums. And the plains, waters, rivers. I talked about how Zambia is rich with water resources, but in water resources, it's not just water, but we also get products from there, of course, reeds for making housing and so on, but we also get food, fish. And in one of the local places called the lozes, in different water bodies, there are special areas where are known to be breeding grounds for fish. And in this Loze tribe, those prestigious spaces where there is always breeding, in olden times, from a long time ago, the Lozes secluded those places and say, in this area there is no fishing because this area is for the king. Only the king can go fishing there, and no one else goes there. But as we grew, we now realize, oh, these people were very clever. These were breeding grounds. And if people can not fish in there, then it means when the fish can go there, can go breed, and then go to the open waters where people have access to go fishing. And it was a decree, and it still is a decree. Even now, I know the spaces they'll say, here you cannot go fishing. So in that way, there is sustainability that is promoted in these particular areas. Then, as I finish, as I'm concluding, I want to just say it is important that as institutions that keep the cultural, natural heritage of institutions, it is very important that we keep this knowledge, because it is as important as the conventional knowledge that we know when we talk about the conservation of environment. And from the traditional ecological knowledge, we can learn how we can deal with the ideas that are affecting us. Climate change, for instance, is happening. How did our forefathers deal with aspects such as this? Can we learn from them? Museums must equally decolonize, acknowledge, and value the knowledge that our ancestors had in conservation of our environment. And this knowledge is what has made us enjoy the rich cultural, ecological riches that we boast of as a people today. And it is important and it is key that museums today preserve, promote this knowledge and pass it on to posterity. It is our role as museums to continue telling the stories of other people and being inclusive of everyone rather than being exclusive of communities that we serve as institutions. And as we do this, we do not have to judge what knowledge we must have in our spaces as museums. And we need to engage the communities. And when we engage them, it must be true engagement. Bring them in as indigenous people with their indigenous knowledge, and not just to show it for the sake of ticking the box, but when we collaborate with the indigenous community, it must be true collaboration with them. Co-curate this particular exhibition and share this knowledge with them. And so I say at this juncture, sheshe.
Thank you very much, Terry, for your fascinating presentation. Actually, Terry is a fish expert. He is a very experienced scholar handling fish collection. So I'm sure if he's going to dive into the fish story, it's another hour. And also, I think it's very interesting how Terry mentioned that traditionally, natural history studies are detached from the past and future. By past, I'm meaning what kind of context and environment give rise to the collections that natural historians are collecting and researching. And future, I'm talking about how natural history studies traditionally doesn't really consider the local community development. And so this is also something that a lot of museums nowadays are advocating, to concern about the past context and also future development with the community. And there's also one thing that I think particularly interesting, how Terry mentioned there is a fish, traditionally only the king was allowed to fish, and that actually in turn indirectly or directly become a kind of conservation methods. Actually, when you thought, well, this is hierarchical, but also in Taiwan's many communities, for example, as I know, for example, in some of the communities in the Taiwan populations, only the leader get to, decide or get the best crops or best resources, but that is not a privilege because they're usually they have this mandatory obligation to take care of every member in the community. Although they get the first access to the best resources, but they have to allocate these resources to people in need in the community. So that in turn is also a kind of, as I see, sustainable development inside the community, which is interesting. And I'm sure there are more interesting aspects if we see it from other angles. So allow me to invite the historian of National Taiwan Museum from the collection management, Dr. Chang Anti, to offer us some commentary.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Anqi from the Collection Department of National Taiwan Museum. But thank you, Terry, for sharing with us the traditional ecological knowledge and how the indigenous people make use of the resources and preserve these resources we have. Well, I'm going to share with you another aspect of a similar theme. I'm going to share with you an exhibition we had at the National Taiwan Museum. So let's look at my slides first. This exhibition, Concoction Times, is a permanent exhibition, and which is just next door. And it's been renewed twice throughout the evolution. But in the very beginning, 16 years ago, it was exploration of the kingdom of camphor. Well, that was the very first exhibition, and it's about the history of the local industry. And this is a picture of the first generation of this exhibition. Well, as you can see here, specimens and the scenario, the living environment reenactment. But where we are right now is actually a warehouse of the camphor built in 1915. So these are the equipment of making camphor, and the initial products will be transported to modern chemical factories for further processing. And you will find a lot of cabinets. So that's why we have preserved such cabinets in the exhibition area. We also designed this wall, and it's inspired by the chemical structure, but it's not easy to maintain. Well, you can also find a model of the factory, camphor factory, because it was an evolution from small scale to a larger scale. And you can also find a small scale model of a modern factory, camphor factory. And of course, the camphor, during the refining process, it produce oil. So we display alongside natural raw materials for comparison. And because it's part of the history in Taiwan, so we have received feedback that this factory was also used to produce opium in addition to camphor. And opium was the opium monopoly. His ancestor criticized about the opium monopoly, and he said that we ignored this part of history. So that's why we renewed, updated the exhibition, and we included the history of this factory being used to produce the opium and the fight of the local Taiwanese people against the Japanese colonialists. And 3 years later, then the indigenous members of the parliament also gave us some feedback because it's about a historical reinterpretation, because the title was Fragrance Through Fire. And the congressman said that this downplayed the colonial experience indigenous people endured during the camphor industry's development. And she also think that we need to disclose war and the conflict between the indigenous peoples and the Japanese colonialists. So the original exhibition was more about the product of camphor and the chemical process. So we added different layer to this exhibition after a discussion with indigenous peoples. So now we also included the war history between the ruler and the indigenous people because of the fight over land ownership. So you will find now pictures of the policemen and the indigenous peoples in the exhibition. And now we also changed the title of the exhibition to Decoction Times because of the grueling process. And now you will also find the trademark of these exported camphor products. Okay, so now if you go to the exhibition next door, you will find 5 areas there. And I want to first highlight this picture. This is a visual display to highlight the rarity of natural camphor. The yellow area indicates the only region in the world producing natural camphor. So controlling this region actually means that you control global camphor supply. And the right image, the camphor trees grow at elevations between 500 and 1800 meters. And this actually overlaps with the indigenous territories in Taiwan. So if you want to develop this camphor as a natural resources, because of the market value, you will inevitably go into the indigenous territories, and that's why the conflict. The second session is about the role of camphor production and the market. So you will find celluloid made of camphor. So that was the camphor products in early times. And in addition, I mentioned earlier conflict and war. So I want to first touch upon the history a little bit. The Qing dynasty rulers or the Japanese colonial government, well, many of them had guns, like firearms. So the third part of this section is about the battlefield, camphor and war. So at that time, the indigenous people, they already had some modern weapons, firearm. And so before the Japanese colonialists arrived, the Qing dynasty army already had some firearm, and they brought such a firearm into Taiwan. And this is a picture of the Japanese military. So, and how about the firearm held by the indigenous peoples? Actually, they also took possession of some of such firearms, and they renovate the firearm based on their usage. But of course, they lost the battle during the colonial period. So by 1915, this battle actually went on to the 1930s. So the war began by 1915 and continued to 1930s. And so this picture, these are some of the pictures where you will find about the first edition of the exhibition, the process of producing camphor. But we changed the exhibition twice. And that's how we have revised the exhibition twice, and that I will end my presentation now. Thank you for your attention.
There are some technical issues, but I'm sure it has been solved. That for English-speaking people, you may hear very weak voice, but now we have adjusted a microphone, so I guess it has improved. And so basically, from our historian at the museum, we talked about how all of our buildings are built during the Japanese colonial period. They serve colonial purposes. And so we, with a lot of NGOs and local communities, we have been changing the narratives of our exhibition. And so if you're interested in this part, I strongly recommend that you can come here to the Nanmen branch of National Museum and visit the permanent exhibition that we've been first change our narratives on how many buildings, one of the buildings, especially this building, has served in the opium manufacturer business. And secondly, the camphor industry, which is the theme of this park or this branch, is similarly ecologically well, sustainable, but it's actually a blood diamond industry in Taiwan because it deprived of indigenous human rights. And so these are also addressed in our museum's exhibition through the collaboration with different parties in Taiwan. And so we have drawn from a more global perspectives or outside Taiwan perspectives towards the local perspectives. And today it is our honor to have invited two panelists to share their examples. So the first panelist I'm going to invite is the principal of the Pauma Elementary School, principal Mr. Pilin Yabu. We have National Taiwan Museum had worked with Pilin Yabu and his team, his wonderful team, in a previous exhibition on sustainable food exhibition. Although the exhibition was about New Year's dish, but the things that Pilin Yabu and his team is doing is very inspiring in how they educate young children, at the same time educating the team to promote traditional cultures which has knowledge inside. And I'm sure his example is going to bring a lot of new thoughts to you. And so a little introduction, a brief introduction of our panelists. Pilin Yabu, he leads Pauma Elementary School, Taiwan's first indigenous experimental elementary school, guided by the philosophy of giving students an ataya soul. The school provides 10 weekly etiocultural curriculum sessions using cross-disciplinary approaches, resulting in students with strong cultural identity and above average academic performance. Recipients of the Ministry of Education's Teachers Award and Principal Leadership Excellence Award and a distinguished National Zhengzhi University alumni, Pilin Yabu connects over 30 indigenous experimental schools across Taiwan. He works to rebuild indigenous knowledge systems and transform Taiwan's indigenous education landscape. So let's give our panelists a warm welcome.
好，各位大家好，还有午安，好，那今天非常高兴哈，能够来这边，然后跟。
It is my honor and privilege to be able to join this international symposium. I would like to give my special thanks to the speakers who have gone before me. They have talked about transforming museums into traditional ecological knowledge repositories and the Nanmen branch evolution over the years. The production of camphor is not a unfamiliar topics. My grandfather used to say that the Japanese would come into the village and chop down camphor trees. They would take our trees and give us cows in exchange. And many, many stories have transpired during when my grandfather was still around. So the previous presentation really strikes a chord in my heart. Today, I would like to talk about the Pauma Elementary School's indigenous and ecological education and how that's executed in a changing world and how we nurture the Ataya spirit. I would like to begin my presentation by showing you two different video clips.
那鱼
很大只，
很大只哦。那你有瞄到吗？
差一点点。
差一点点了。好的。
你把这个红色点点当做是你的眼睛，好，你今天眼睛往水面底下看，好，我水面底下有没有贴一个黄色的标签？有。好，你把它当做是鱼，好，我今天这样子扫过去，扫过去，好，有没有照到那只鱼了？对不对？好，你照到这只鱼，但是你鱼叉这样出去的时候，有没有看到？我有插到吗？
没有，
没有插到，为什么？
因为折射，方向不一样。折射是一个折射。
那其实这堂课最主要的就是让学生去认识我们传统的鱼叉的方式，那间接的去了解说，因为鱼叉的方式相较于比如说现在的渔网啊、毒鱼啊、电鱼啊等等的这些方式，其实对大自然有害之外，而且它能抓到鱼虽然多，但是大的跟小的都抓得到。
有没有看到鱼？
有啊，它跑掉了。
跑掉了。
那鱼叉捕捞的方式，其实它效率不这么的高，但是就是捕到的可能就只有1、2只。那其实就跟我们泰雅族的嘎嘎一样，就是东西我们够用够吃就好了。
好，从这边可以看到，就是说是这是我们学校平常上课的样子。啊，这个不是课外活动。刚刚副主任。
What we actually the courses we actually conduct on a regular basis, this is not just like a once in a while school outing. It is in fact part of our integral curriculum.
来，1、2、3。
很多次了吧？
很多次了。
对啊，跟爸爸，
跟爸爸。
阿公跟舅舅。
那你呢？
第一次。
第一次。
对啊。
真的。
真的。
这个已经不下100次了，这位先生。上住，上住，来，上住。有了吗？哎呀！哇，打到什么？
打到什么？
你别拉下来，不要滚哦！我们打到什么？原住民的话怎么讲？好，这个是我们那个学校的正式的课程哦。那我们为什么会
our formal curriculum content? You might be asking why. And I think I might deviate from the field of museology for a minute. I believe it is important to take our traditional ecological knowledge and to put it into practice and to teach our children the processes during which these knowledge could actually be applied and put into practice. In fact, going back to the 17th century and all the way up to this present day, you could see that the diagram shows you that the main inhabitants of the island back in the 17th century were mainly indigenous peoples, but today it is another story. And over the past centuries, indigenous people's schooling or education has also evolved. It has been over 129 years since Taiwan's indigenous peoples began receiving quote-unquote modern schooling or education. And this could be described as a process of assimilation. In 1895, under the Japanese colonial rule, the education of Taiwan's indigenous peoples became part of a broader effort to Japanize them. And this continued into the KMT period of the nationalist parties period after World War II. The perception of indigenous peoples was that their way of life needed improvement and their customs or traditions were inherently undesirable. Therefore, improvements will have to be enforced. So there had been numerous campaigns to open the mountains and pacify the quote unquote the savages or the indigenous. And then in 1998, the Indigenous Peoples Education Act was finally promulgated. And over the years, the indigenous education has evolved. But however, from the principal's perspective, I do not believe that the spirit embedded in the Indigenous Peoples Education Act had been realized. Scholars and academic literature generally consider indigenous peoples to lack competitiveness. They're often described as lacking skills, less competitive because of their family issues, because them being located in a more remote area. However, from the children's perspective, what kind of culture are they learning? What kind of system are they being placed into? Nothing of their own, nothing related to their own ethnic identity. Michael Foucault once said that the omnipresent and the comprehensive control of power in contemporary society is mainly enabled through cultural means of various knowledge systems. And this is what is happening to the indigenous people. And Mr. Chang, a scholar, also said that for a long time, the school education only teaches indigenous students to understand the general social culture, but not their own social culture. Here is a comparison table between indigenous peoples and Western worldviews. On the left, we have a list of indigenous worldviews, and on the right, we have the Western worldviews, from approaches, values, philosophies, understanding of the world, understanding of space and time. The indigenous worldviews are quite different. When I was a kid, whenever we had a village meeting, I remember seeing that my grandparents always ending the meeting by saying that, will this decision have negative effect on our neighbors, on the villages around us? So it is very important to note that the indigenous people really emphasize camaraderie and cooperation, caring for the neighbors and people around you. However, when I started going to school, the teacher told me that you want to be number one. There's only one champion. So that really runs contrary to the indigenous worldview. In 2013, I assumed my teaching role at a local school. And this is what I was told by one of the elders. I was told that I need to think about what can be done for Atayal children at Atayal school. How to become a genuine human being, a person with the Atayal soul, with the Atayal spirit, so that they could become a whole, all-arounded, comprehensive, with multifacets, a person with Atayal soul. Therefore, I began a series of campaigns. I decided that the subjectivity of education starts with renaming the school. So after that was done, we started developing our own curriculum. So this shows you our evolution in the first 3 years. And this diagram shows you how we have developed the very first indigenous knowledge system or roadmap in Taiwan. And this has had major influences in how knowledge is constructed and organized for the 16 different indigenous groups here in Taiwan. You could see that we start with spirits, culture, ecological knowledge, life skills, land, tribes, history, art, music, dance, Atayal literature, social structures, to name a few. You could see there are 7 different cores, 6 different courses, 338 teaching units, and 2,560 class periods. Therefore, we have a very well organized structure so that Atayal children each week will be able to attend anywhere between 10 to 13 indigenous culture and custom related courses or class periods. This has enabled the indigenous children to base their learning on their mother language, to develop an understanding of the world using their indigenous worldview, and be able to compare and contrast. Here, I show you the Ataya culture curriculum, which includes 26 different topics. And we have also developed theme-based learning concept maps for each unit. We have also been working with the National Education Research Institute to further refine our curriculum. SDG has become such a topical issue in recent years. We have been aligning our courses with SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals, with the Ataya Gaga concept at its core. Whenever we discuss the SDGs with the elders in the tribe, they often joke about how the SDGs are already part of their daily practice. So we thought, why not develop our own SDGs that is really centered on Atayo Gaga? And this shows you how we are aligning, we have developed our own SDGs and connecting it with our curriculum. For example, SDG 13, announced by the United Nations, is then renamed into SMRU, which is then further connected to the 4 practices on a personal and village level listed at the bottom of the slide. This also shows you how we have developed our different SDGs regarding mutual assistance, food sharing, good virtual, water management, education, work, meetings and discussions, emergency response, ecological living, just to name a few. This really further highlights the fact that these concepts and goals have long been existent in our elders' worldview and have already been in practice for centuries. So now I'm just showing you more of the our achievements, and these surveys indicate that children have developed greater cultural understanding, enhanced ethnic identity, and their basic abilities and skills have also shown remarkable improvements. It is our goal that the Ataya culture and the local resources will be what we center their learning on, and we're transforming what people believe to be disadvantaged learning into empowered learning. In fact, back in 2016, there's only one school dedicated to developing its own indigenous curriculum. But over the years, here we are, 2025, we have more than 43, even 45 schools that are dedicated to ethnic or indigenous experimental education. Here I have another video clip that I would like to share with you.
因为很累，然后大家都不见了，然后就很想放弃。然后同学一直在往前，然后都没有休息，一直跟着大部队，就想说自己也要跟着他们，所以就一直让自己一直坚持下去。
没有问题。
没有。爸。他叫我。我们来看。放完背包就下去帮忙哈进，因为哈进他太慢了，我跟阿慧， 我们2个去帮忙那个卡蒂这样的分享，还有互相，所以我才会拖着疲累的身体去帮哈蒂，这就是泰雅族的嘎嘎。
终于到了。
到了。
怎么样？
How are you doing? I feel pain. It's like giving birth to a child. A lot of pain in my waist. Only 2 degrees Celsius in early morning.
就给我抢啊！对，你看，王启老师带领人那么强。
Teacher Wang Qi is helping you. That's why you're getting stronger.
加油！
Go, go,
你现在是属于
Hakim.
领先集团哦。
You're now one of the leaders.
哎，不错。哎，
You have become stronger and better. Are you okay? No problem.
坐进去了。
The ancestral spirit is helping us. That's why we're able to see the mountaintop.
感谢。加油！
你手做环保。
啊是。
Go, go, go. I'm very happy because I'm able to search for the root of our ancestors, walk on the path they walked before. Ataya Gaga means solidarity, mutual assistance, helping each other. When we have food, we give food to the senior people first. I studied Ataya culture for 6 years in Puma school. When I grow up, I will go back to my tribe and help my people. When I look at the mountaintop, I feel that I'm a true member of Ataya, and I'm able to promote the Ataya culture. I will be stronger, and when I am stronger, I come back to my tribe and help my people.
好，那个
Okay, so we started from school education and get our children to learn more about their culture. So I use the perspective of a school, and now I work with many other schools. So and that's why we were the first experimental indigenous school, and now there are 45 of such schools in Taiwan. And we're also working with the Ministry of Education, working on Ataya curriculum. We hope that this Ataya curriculum will become a national level curriculum like what they have in New Zealand. With that, we will have more teachers trained and specialized in this area, so that our indigenous children will enter into a new stage. Because in the past, what our educational process would turn the indigenous children into someone else. But we want them to still retain their indigenous roots. Thank you.
Years of experience. It's not just the year when they started the experimental indigenous education. They've been paving the way for years, but even before that. And looking at that, it always make me ponder, or make us working in the museum ponder, or wonder how inside the museum we can do to create such environment for people to recognize themselves and to learn from their cultures, not just dominating by one specific mainstream culture. And so the next panelist, also with much privilege on our own, that we have invited Dr. Fulu Cai. Brief introduction on our panelist. He is currently the director of the National Museum of Prehistory since 2024. And he has actually, before that, held various positions, including board member of the Public Television Service Foundation and advisory member of Hakka TV. He is also currently a preparatory committee member of the Marine Protected Area Evaluation System under the Ocean Conservation Administration. And Dr. Tai's research interests include visual anthropology, historical anthropology, ritual and performance, the Amis people, Taiwan's indigenous war experience during the Pacific War, indigenous social movements, and the maritime culture of the Amis people. He has published several works and produced multiple award-winning ethnographic documentaries. Furthermore, he is a member of the Future Earth Taipei Ocean Working Group, which promotes collaboration between indigenous maritime, traditional ecological knowledge, and marine science. So let's give him a warm welcome, plus.
Ciparai ini nganu mako ci futuro nialo no mako di tolal di pusong magamakay tani tini tapak sila no katakran ilaw tu tamawanan tini paini tu lapang tini hatria sa puso ako ilaw. Please allow me to give a acknowledgement of the indigenous people in this basin of Taipei Basin, Katakran people first. And thank you very much for coming. And so also welcome our international friends from overseas to my little small mountains country that is very famous from a social movement. He passed away several decades ago, 郑南榕, 小小多山的国家. So welcome you. And you can see the mountains in Pilin Yabu's video. A lot of mountains here. Okay, so I will talk my topic in Mandarin Chinese later. So I hope your translator is okay right now. Good. Okay, good. Okay, 谢谢。那我想，因为我们
Okay, let me introduce my museum. And actually, at the end of last year, my museum worked with ICOM and ICAM for International Committee for Architecture and Music Technique. The 50th conference was held at the National Museum of Prehistory of Taiwan. So last year we hosted that conference, and I'm looking forward to meet many of you again in Dubai in November. I also learned that many of you will come to my museum, Taidong, in 2 days. Taidong is a very different place, as you can see from my skin color. Yes, Taidong has a stronger sun, and I think our food is better than Taipei. Okay, welcome our friends from ICOM. And I want to, well, first mention that Taiwan share some similarity with US, Canada, New Zealand, or Brazil. This is a place where many immigrants came and settled in this island. The indigenous peoples in Taiwan actually accounts for like 2%. And the indigenous peoples of Taiwan belongs to the Austronesian family. And Austronesian family is in the Pacific region. So in Australia and the Highland area in Papua New Guinea, including the Southeast Asia and Madagascar in the Indian Ocean. So Taiwan in this Austronesian family actually plays a pivotal role based on archaeological and linguistic evidence. The indigenous peoples of Taiwan have had strong ties with the Austronesian family thousands of years ago. Actually, 3,000 or 4,000 years ago, Taiwan already exported the Taiwanese jade to Southeast Asia. You could still find some jade in Vietnam. And now Taiwan exports a very famous product, semiconductor. So Taiwan is a small island with a lot of mountains, but for thousands of years, Taiwan plays a pivotal role, and we have strong connections with the rest of the world. So despite the small land area we have, I feel that we're important. So my topic is about the islands, oceans, and homelands as epistemology and the methodology of TEK, traditional ecological knowledge. Well, let me first introduce the National Museum of Prehistory of Taiwan. Well, this museum, of course, is about research, collection, and display, and education about the Austronesian history and culture of the indigenous peoples in Taiwan. 2 years ago, in 2023, we renovated our building, and we introduced this concept of a new museum. So we paid more attention to experience of the visitors, visitor experience and interaction. And we also want to be an important player in the society.
The concept of the new museum reimagines the museum as a participatory social space that prioritizes visitor experience and interaction. Within the global shift in the museum paradigm, the NMP has set forth its vision for the next 4 years, between 2025 and 2028. We aim to become the hub for Taiwan's prehistory, Austronesian histories, societies, cultures, and the environment through representation, revitalization, and regeneration. Through innovative and engaging experiences, we aim to inspire people to explore and reflect on Taiwan's place in the world. How do we draw in a wider range of audiences? How do we position ourselves in the world? Representation is a topic that is very often discussed within the museum profession. And we are committed to becoming a contemporary hub for revitalization work. And Pilin Yabu is actually an old friend of mine. During my internship program, in my final years of my college education, while I was making some documentaries, I in fact went to his elementary school, and he one time took his students to visit my museum. He caught us off guard. So he and I are long-term advocates for the indigenous social movement. And another topic that under discussion is regeneration. What that really means is that we must go back to the origin of the Austronesian culture, which has a history of thousands of years. Despite the similarities between different Austronesian tribes or peoples, there are great differences. For example, the ability for maritime navigation could vary greatly between different Austronesian peoples. So Austronesian or Austronesian culture as a collective term can be further explored, and to view Taiwan, reimagine Taiwan as a hub for our development and diaspora. And we want to become a hub for Austronesian history, culture, society, and the environment in Taiwan. What this really means is that we need to work with different groups of practitioners, particularly the indigenous communities. Being in National Museum, we are a hub of different types of resources, particularly academic resources. So when working with indigenous communities, we realize that sometimes they have access to less of such resources. So it's important for us to combine our strength in order to minimize such weaknesses. So this is a definition of our objectives or vision for the next 4 years. We are committed to becoming a contemporary hub for Austronesian history, culture, society, and environment in Taiwan. Given the breadth of topics related to Austronesian societies and cultures, upon assuming my role, I assessed the current developments in Taiwan and the broader Austronesian world. I taught at the Austronesian culture department at Taichung University. So for decades, I've been following the broader Austronesian research trends. So based on prevailing research trends, I decided to focus the museum's Austronesian mission on 3 interconnected themes. 1, tattooing traditions, tapping tattooing traditions. It once vanished because, especially during the colonial period, during the Japanese occupation period, the tattooing tradition vanished because of the Japanese ban on such tradition. But now it has become cool and trendy again. The tattooing culture is making a strong comeback. And the Taiwan tribes, the different indigenous communities are reconnecting with such tradition, exchanging with experiences with Austronesian peoples in the Philippines, New Zealand, and Hawaii, Samoan traditions. So over the past 20 years, we've been creating these reconnections so that in November this year, we will be organizing our second Tattooing Tradition Festival, and we welcome everyone's participation. And the next topic of our focus will be Austronesian navigation. And currently, we have there's a boat departing from Hawaii and headed for quote-unquote Mother Island, namely Taiwan, and its estimated arrival time is sometime in 2027. And many people wonder how people from the Polynesia ended up here. And is it because of war? Is it because of accidental events? And the Hawaiian people said that it is due to the Austronesian navigation skills. So back in the 70s, they actually found Maupiaro from Micronesia to teach them the navigation skills. Now, such a boat has gone from Palau to Taiwan, and he has returned to Palau again. So there are many of these campaigns for revitalizing Austronesian navigation skills. And the third aspect of our focus is traditional ecological knowledge related to the 2 topics. So the TEK, traditional ecological knowledge, we hope to channel the museum's strength in research collections and exhibitions into meaningful phased efforts through these thematic focus. Over the past decade, my research has centered on exploring the oceanic culture of the Amis people. Through this work, I have come to deeply understand that indigenous TEK has long been overlooked by Western science, yet holds vital insights into contemporary issues of environmental and ecological change. This realization led me to reflect on how museums might engage with TEK as a dynamic system, one that evolves across time and space. Through their 4 core functions: research, collection, exhibition, education. And I began asking what forms of knowledge can museums generate for both the public and the academic community through such engagement. Therefore, we established a research team within the museum dedicated to TEK. And when I assumed the role of the director, I decided that we need to identify a focal point of our research. But of course, I've had nightmares. I've had dreams of debtors knocking down the door because we lack funds to implement necessary research. However, this interdisciplinary team was established with some funding coming from the central government. And we understand that we need to bring together expertise from anthropology, environmental science, and museum studies, and professionals with practical experiences. And we were able to build upon decades of grounded academic research and social engagement in Amis, Bunong, and Yami communities, ranging from 10 to 30 years. We employ a decolonial participatory action research approach. I just attended an annual festival participation just last week. That's why my voice is still a little bit scratchy. And I was able to ask for leave up to 3 days so that I was able to really participate in the community-based indigenous activities. And we also have some of our members that had long been accepted by the local community. Our focus spans a variety of ecological environments, including forests, rivers, coastal waters, and offshore islands, particularly the Lanyu, the Orchid Islands, working with communities to build knowledge, strengthen education, and support social development. Time has quickly gone by. I will need to speed up. So we're able to, through our museum practice, gain integrated academic input from anthropology and environmental science. In the past, when it comes to the discussion of TEK, especially from the resource management perspective, they highlight the importance. However, the focus was really on integrating the TEK into the overall framework. It is just another way of implementing colonization. However, reflections were conducted over the years, and scholarly attention has been turned to indigenous TEK, and then we are adopting the 2ICN approach. So this essentially highlights an approach that enables collaborative learning and co-creation with local indigenous communities. We strive to see and understand the ecological resilience embedded in indigenous TEK. So it is very important that it is a cumulative body of knowledge, practices, and belief systems passed down through generations via cultural transmission. It is shaped by adaptive processes and concerns the relationships between living beings, including humans and their environments. So this is a very important concept in framing our analysis of TEK. So based on this perspective, and then also combining Mr. White's analysis conducted in 2012, we were able to generate this analytical framework of traditional ecological knowledge from the perspective of dynamic social ecological resilience, including the following 3 aspects: cultural, social, and ecological. And its focus is placed on the passing down of the TEK through generations. We talked about see with both eyes. Many of us were trained in the Western academic framework, including myself. And this is quite a stark contrast compared to the indigenous worldview. So we must be able to see with both eyes, with one eye, with both eyes, incorporating the indigenous and the traditional and the a Western traditional worldview. And here I show you a research framework of the two-eyed seeing approach. And I believe that we need to go back to the roots or the reasons for conducting researches by museums. This is not just about generating contents for exhibition, but about creating a framework for co-curation, co-research, and collaboration, especially hoping that the results can be turned into a fertile ground for our future practices within the indigenous community. It could also be used to inform the framework which we could create for the education and outreach programs at the museum. And the International Council of Museums adopted a new definition of museums at its 2022 Prague conference, which is defined as follows. We're not just focusing on research. I'm not saying that research is not important. Without research, there is no academic and scientific basis for your discourse. We need to focus on research, but beyond that, we also need to focus on offering varied experiences for education, enjoyment, reflection, and knowledge sharing. So it is our plan that in 2028, that we will be able to turn our 2 years of research program into a solid exhibition. And in 2029, this exhibition may go on tours. And I would like to thank our partners for their dedication and hard work. I would also like to thank the National Taiwan Museum for offering us this platform for communicating our objectives and goals. Once again, I warmly welcome you to visit our museum, and I hope to receive all of you in the near future. With that, I conclude my presentation. Thank you.
As Phaedra mentioned, I've been working in different Indigenous communities in Canada for many, many years. Your comments about the education, the school system was really interesting to me, because one of the things that I've done is to develop a museum studies training program for Inuit specifically. And so trying to Inuitize museum education was a real challenge. And I really appreciated hearing what you've done here, and particularly the on-the-land experiences, because that's what we always talk about, the importance of actually learning on the land, being on the land. You know, being Indigenous is being on the land. And so having all of those experiences in that context and how valuable that is. So I really appreciated your comments. The second presentation, I also really appreciated, particularly your beginning with a land acknowledgement, which I will do in my paper as well. We always give land acknowledgements in Canada to acknowledge the traditional Indigenous owners of this land, and I would like to acknowledge them here today and to say thank you for welcoming us on this land. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here and to learn from you and to share with you, and it's really wonderful. But then when you were talking about the Austronesian experience, I also spent some time working in the Solomon Islands, and so I have that sort of Pacific connection, and so much of what you were saying really echoed with my experience in the Pacific Islands as well. And your mention of two-eyed seeing, which I also mentioned in my paper. Two-eyed seeing is I don't know, I was so happy to see that comment there because I wasn't sure if that was a familiar concept here, because it was introduced by a Mi'kmaq elder in Canada originally. And as a Métis person, I don't know if you're familiar with what that means. Being Métis, it's not just a question of being mixed ancestry. It's a question of being descended from the European fur traders and the Indigenous people of this land, so in Canada. So it doesn't just mean mixed blood. But the two-eyed seeing concept is very much sort of a Métis way of seeing things, because you see things with one eye from your European perspective and with the other eye from your Indigenous perspective. And I just think that is so important to keep in mind. And when we're talking about traditional ecological knowledge, there is so much that Western scientific knowledge could learn from Indigenous knowledge. And we really need to pay attention to it, frankly, before it's too late, right? So I really enjoyed both presentations and thought it was a very stimulating time. So thank you.
And now I would like to invite our speakers today on stage for a brief general discussion session over here. Yes, thank you very much. And also Dr. Chang. Please have a seat. Right, thank you very much. Okay, so the session goes like this. Now it's a Q&A session. You're welcome to raise any questions. For our on-site audience, you may just raise your hand, or if you're feeling a bit shy, you can scan the QR code as our online participants do, submitting your questions into the Slido platform. But out of etiquette, I think it would be great if you can address who you are and where you're from, and if you are asking the question to a specific speaker. Okay, so do we have any on-site questions from our physical participants? If not, I did see some questions from from our platform 24 minutes ago, the first question. And this question is drafted in Chinese, so I will be speaking in Chinese, and I rely on our interpreter in interpreting this question. 谢谢比令雅布校长的精彩分享。
Principal Pilin Yabu, in Taiwan, when Indigenous, the conflict between Indigenous people and the Japanese colonialists, when you present this piece of history in the museums, do you think that we should say this is a Japanese colonial rule or Japanese occupation of Taiwan? This is my first question. And the second question, when you think about the interpretation of the colonial experience for the Indigenous people, then how would the museums interpret this experience, and how about the ethics for museums? Well, thank you for this question. Well, in terms of interpretation, Japanese occupation or Japanese colonial period, Japanese rule. Well, from my perspective, well, unless you have strong political implications, you use Ataya language, we would describe them as the group of people who came to take our land, who occupied our land. So maybe we can say that this is Japanese occupation.
Translation is closer to occupation instead of ruling period. In their in the Atayal language, how they refer to the Japanese period. 蔡校长，蔡馆长。
In our museum, we did receive letters from visitors, and it was quite interesting because it's a different perspective that will lead you to say Japanese colonialists or Japanese occupation of the land. Well, if you say Japanese occupation, this is more like from the ROC government's perspective. The Japanese occupied our land, but then we now have different perspectives and plural perspective. So we might say Japanese rule in a more neutral way. But for the indigenous people, I think principle Pilin Yabu means that this is a kind of aggression. So no matter it's Japanese people or the Chinese people, when they came to Taiwan, they took the indigenous people's land. So that is occupation for them. I want to add such information because we did receive some feedback from our visitors, and this is based on a different position, different perspective of the history, and of course there's no unified way of looking or judging this piece of history.
From which perspective that you're speaking. And I have to say, because I'm not from the indigenous community, and in our museum, we basically follow the textbook, because when we receive complaints, we have to give them the reference. So we say, oh, according to this reference, this is the safest way that we deal with complaints. But I think there's more that we can do, absolutely. For example, oftentimes when you hear people introducing the history of Taiwan, they say, oh, the history of Taiwan started from the Qing dynasty. But no, because we have a lot of people who happened here before Qing dynasty, let alone the first colonizer is not even the Qing Empire, it's the Dutch people. We have a Dutch audience here. Yeah, so I think some of the things that we can do, for example, when we're introducing Taiwan's history to younger audience or to international audience, we can start by that the history of Taiwan started a long time ago, thousands of years ago, when the Austronesian peoples came to Taiwan. This is at least one sentence or two sentences that we can do, and although that may not directly decide which term we're using, but that will give our audience, more spaces to ponder on this which perspective that we are taking. 我接下来看
用什么样的观点来看待这个问题? Okay, second question is also written in Chinese. In the display and exhibition in the museums, the tradition versus modern, or ecology versus cultures or civilization, they're usually a result of regulations or rules, or maybe the classifications system, or the educational curriculum. But now many concepts are changing and they become fluid. So how do museums break through the existing or the old-fashioned classification?
Maybe Dr. Can you? The question. Okay. Yep. You mean the last part of the question? So I think that he said a lot of these dichotomy, you know, they were formed, were constructed laterwards with regulations or with curriculum, and so when facing this fluid ecological local knowledge, how can museum have breakthroughs out of its, you know, existing system or existing pedagogy framework, in addition to working with the community? In addition to that, what else can we do to make a breakthrough out of this framework?
Okay, it seems that's for the ladies, this is for the men. Okay, thank you very much, and thank you for that particular observation and question, that you say it is certainly a challenge. It's as the same a challenge that we were just, my colleagues were just addressing a while ago, and as museum professionals, as we start to decolonize as institutions and start wanting to be more inclusive of others, it is important not to start thinking how we engage communities or the less representative communities within the confines of how we have been operating as institutions, but be brave to break those barriers, to go beyond and become institutions that offer a true platform of others that have never been represented. So to have a channel of how to do this in a straight format, as how we say the alphabet A, B, C, D, is not easy per se, but each institution, each museum must find its way of how to truly engage, how to truly collaborate. And I underline the term collaborate because, again, like I mentioned before, when we want to start engaging other communities, it's not for a good to do thing. It must be a true belief that we want to represent others and be open-minded and not be closed. And as we engage, and in that particular way, as we started truly engaging with communities, and one of the things has not been said, but I know it is an inherent thing as museums start engaging, for instance, indigenous community, there is an aspect of trust that must be built. And once we start having that trust as people that collaborate, we find the best way to do these things together, not as museum dictating to the others, but both of us agreeing how we go beyond the confines of all these rules that have been set, which by and large, as in museums circle, are set with the Western models from which we have been taught, most of us, the museological aspect. Thank you.
And I would like to invite comments from Dr. Zhang.
分享一下台湾的经验。那其实我听到
I would like to share the Taiwanese experience. The curatorial narrative and strategies have gone above the limitations you have talked about. For example, the taxonomy in traditional museology. We have found ways to transcend above that. And for the educational curriculum, we understand there's a certain percentage of indigenous and mainstream culture, but as a curator, we have found ways to transcend above all of these limitations. Number one, when dealing with indigenous topics, we adopt the approach of co-curation. We invite indigenous community members to join us to curate the exhibition. Sometimes we would even bring the artifacts that are in the community into the museum space for exhibition, for research, interpretation, or we invite external indigenous experts and perspectives to recalibrate our own approaches. So I believe that over the years, we have found ways to break away from the limitations, may it be the national curriculum or may it be the taxonomy limitations. And I think the biggest challenge is the contemporary knowledge construct. And I think that hasn't been torn down yet. So Terry talked about how to flip the narrative from an indigenous perspective. This can be difficult to achieve. So how do we use the contemporary knowledge framework as a basis to further our understanding of the indigenous people's roles they played? Is a rebellion, is a collaboration, so that what's happening at the peripheral can be brought into the center. So these are all things we need to examine and rediscover. So I believe that is a very critical limitation we are still trying to address today.
We have very limited schedule because we have other itineraries. So I think this will be our last question. I genuinely thank all the participants who are raising questions online, but due to limited question, I have to make a stop. So last question for our on-site audience over here.
好，谢谢。我是太鲁阁族，然后是花莲的。我目前在
Ecological tribe from the city of Hualien. I am the co-convener of the Tarago Tribe Knowledge Center. And we are also creating our own curriculum as well. When it comes to anthropology, archaeology, or history, these topics seem quite distant. I do not have very positive feelings about these topics. Why do I say that? Let me give you an example. About 2 to 3 years ago, a museum approached us to study our fabric weaving techniques. However, they come up with names for our patterns. They said this is a hexagon and this is a diamond shape. They gave our traditional shapes scientific names. So when we co-created or co-curated the exhibition, they brought in their own archaeological perspective. They were telling us, oh, we believe this is how we believe that this pattern should appear on the fabric. They had an opposite perspective. and they believe they should be worn in a different way, although they're not from our tribe. And they were coming up with very academic names for the different patterns. For example, they're an owl, an eye-looking owl, or some animals are the names that we use to name these patterns. So we gave them the information. However, when they eventually printed out the exhibition text, our knowledge, our words were not included. So we communicated and urged them to make changes. They eventually included our native language and expressed these names in the Tarogo native language. So that was one experience we had. People from the outside world brought in their own way of classifying their own approach to taxonomy. It is a very linear approach. It is a perspective based on the dichotomy of things. When they brought in these external perspectives, there were even experts making insensitive comments. And these experts were pointing at the female tribe member, saying that, oh, this pattern that you're wearing is not for women. However, it was a garment handed down by that woman's grandmother. So they were trying to sort of instruct us using their own outsiders' knowledge base. So I feel that there should be more respect, and then there should be a more inclusive and sensitive approach.
Is that the comments, right? 是评论吗？是你有问题？
So what my question really is about is, how do we break away from these limitations so that there could be a genuine dialogue and ways of collaboration? Anthropologists sometimes have such approaches, and I need to talk to my researchers so that they don't make the same mistakes. So sometimes people are stuck in their discipline. They are not necessarily aware of the academic limitations that have been imposed upon themselves when dealing with indigenous topics. Let me give you an example. 2 years ago, one researcher was making comments saying that a type of hujiao sea bream had already gone extinct. However, the indigenous communities said that it is not true. We see such fish swimming around the ocean all the time. But the researcher refused to believe. He believes in his way of classifying fish. In his world of epistemology, he believes in whatever he believes in, and without incorporating others' perspectives. Sometimes there could be multiple realities that are concurrently possible. For certain archaeologists, some of them may adopt a purely scientific approach. So it takes time for changes to happen, or maybe it takes a museum director like me to push them towards a more inclusive direction. So this takes time, the change of mindset. Sometimes the time is too long for us to wait. Then a revolution is needed. That's why social movements take place. I would also like to share my thoughts. I work for the collections management department. I have encountered difficulties which I may not have a solution to. People talk about sharing knowledge with the public. Now, what is really trending is to put the knowledge online so that it's searchable, so that it's available on the internet. The most widely used knowledge would be Mandarin Chinese. So such knowledge database is predominantly presented in the Mandarin Chinese language. However, the knowledge related to the indigenous cultures would then have to be presented in their respective indigenous languages. So this is a major challenge, because to create such a database and made available online in Chinese alone is already an extremely daunting task. So when in the process of making such information available to the public, we encounter the difficulty of having to make decisions. But of course, there are some general terms that people would agree on. But I believe that in the future, a glossary or some sort of dictionary would be necessary for people to be able to search in indigenous languages. For example, a lot of the data we have was from the Japanese occupation period, and then then Japanese language will also have to be included as well. I think you raised a very important point. In the meeting that took place last month, we talked about taxonomy and classification. Technology-wise, it could be achieved or it could be sped up using AI, and many of the fields could be filled in. For example, fact, it's a hexagon, so that's a fact. But you also need interpretive information as well. So the interpretive supplementary information is the key. So when you have a discussion with generative AI, you give a command. I'm looking for the Taya tribes, such and such pattern. Although it may not be 100% match with the exact names given to that artifact, once it matches the descriptive content, there's a match, right? But to be able to provide that function, it's going to cost a lot of money, and it takes time, and then you will need to allocate budget. But technically, that could be achieved. The system we have is old, so we encounter situations like what you described. It has to be a match with the
schedule, so I have to conclude our session. And I think one of the very obvious conclusion is that we do not have enough space. We do not have enough space dedicated to different knowledge systems in the museum, both physically in the exhibition space and virtually in the work routine of the museum staff, and even in our annual budgets. Although with that, I think this symposium is not just a starter, but we are reinforce, this phenomenon. And also thank you for participating and also offering your comments that more people get to highlight this issue. And actually many museums has been doing, for example, in the exhibition, adapting how things are addressed in the original language. And as you said, when we're referring to a certain pattern, different communities within the same quote-unquote category, they might have different ways to saying that. So it is also very important to highlight the heterogeneity within the community, and that's something that we can start doing at least from the exhibition, and also with some technology like AI and advanced database system, we may be able to incorporate more of these data. So this is something that is going on. We don't have a conclusion yet on this symposium, but thank you very much for participating, and I hope that you will continue participating in our museum's event, and that's keep the discussion going. So thank you very much. And the last part, do not leave because I forgot the group photo. So I would like to invite our speakers back to the seats, and we will have a group photo. Sorry. 对，拍照。And also with all the staff members who has been here Maybe there are some seats, empty slots over here. And for our online participants, thank you very much for participating. Our session is concluded over here. Thank you very much.